Hey out and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So here I want to show you how you can get your stats, your totals, to those sweet 90% as a damage dealer so you can maximize your damage potential. I get asked a lot, how can I do it? You stand here outside of combat and you always see your stats look awful. They're not at 90%. Well, you have to be aware that a lot of gear will give you their stats when you're in combat and attacking your enemy. And those are the gear pieces you use. And you end up with all these 90%. We can see that right here in combat. Now you're going to have to continually attack your target to maintain all of those stats. So how does this work? How can you do it for yourself? What actually gives all of these stats that you may be missing? Let's cover all that in this video. So first things first, the way the stat system works is to get 90%, you need things that are going to add to your total. And the biggest thing is your ratings. They're going to give a maximum of 50%. You can read that here with an example of our crit severity. It's at green. It says there, this rating is at its maximum effect. It shows what your total is, but you can see the rating contribution is 50%. This is, in brackets, the maximum you can possibly gain from ratings. If your ratings are red, you have too much and you want to rebalance so that it puts it back in the green. If you have them just on white, then you still have things you miss. You can increase this further to get that total percentage higher. You can see our rating contribution here is only 45.6, so we could get another 4.4% from increasing our ratings up to green. Now, the higher the item level you get, you'll find it easier and easier to get these ratings to maximum. That is because you're using things like mythic enchantments to give you ratings. You're using mythic insignias to give you ratings. You may have guild boons giving that too, and companion gear. You will also have party buffs that are like auras that you'll get from other players in group content that will give you ratings as well. You can see what I mean here by having a rating on red. It will show you that you are wasting stats. We have over 2,500 ratings that are in excess and have no effect. So we need to rebalance that. For example, we're going to move Mystic Aura back over to our dominant force, and that equalizes it out, and we're not wasting those anymore. You can get gear pieces and such which give you ratings, but as you get towards endgame, you don't really want to use those pieces because you'll just be wasting it. For example, these Dragonhide boots can give me 10,000 accuracy. I don't need that whatsoever. We could get a little bit more power. When we're in a group, we will get that, no problem. But ultimately, the biggest place for ratings is, the enchantment page right here with these artifacts and then all these insignias. You can use certain companion gear to balance ratings along with different guild boons here in the offense. And there's also some consumables as well, like guild food here that could give us 4,000 ratings. However, the thing that people most struggle with is getting the totals. How do you get those to that 90%, that green, that maximum? Well, you have to look to other areas because again, the maximum you're getting when your ratings are green is 50%. So you miss 40% to get to 90% total. So you're missing 200% in stats. Where do you get all of that? Well, again, there are a lot of different ways. A lot of gear is going to give those total percentages. Again, it's not going to be like super straightforward. This headpiece is. It very simply says you just need your stamina over 75% and you gain 10% accuracy. There you go. But then you have more vague bonuses like this armor here. You might have to whip out a calculator and figure it out. Basically, you're damaging your enemy and every time you hit them for more than 10% of your maximum hit points, which should be most of the time on a damage dealer, you gain a stack of 1.5% accuracy and 1.5% combat advantage for 15 seconds, but it has maximum 5 stacks. So you do the math, you can get 7.5% accuracy and 7.5% combat advantage. And that is going to get added to your totals again. And so you're only gaining those bonuses when you're continually attacking your target. Those are bonuses, yes, you can rely on if you're a class who can attack your target a lot. And that should be all damage dealers. You just need to prioritize always attacking. So you have an armor piece that can give you like 15%. Armors piece can give you 10%. Boots can give you 5%. Weapons can give you 10%. This neck and waist set can give me 7.5%. Plus the recharge speed bonus. Ultimately, there are a lot of different bonuses you can use. We just only covered the gear, scratching the surface on the amount of stats you can get. You have an overload giving you 10%, the devil's precision, which is giving you 10% stats, a combat enchantment giving you 15%. That combat enchantment is the lightning flash. You can read there, again, has the same thing, giving you stacks of 2.5%, maximum 3 stacks, and so on. And then you have boons, can give you 8%. That's just these small teeny little boons here, 1% there, 1% there, 1% there. All these just giving 1%, and it adds up 8%. You have the companion enhancement, can give you 7.5%. This is the purple power just here, precision. We're using it to give us 7.5% crit strike. Then we have the offensive tamed velociraptor. This would be an equip bonus we can have here. And when we're in a full party and everybody else is using this, you gain 18.75% power. This is not actually 3.8%, it's 3.75%. The game just rounds. So that's a massive bonus you can gain right there when in a full party. I will show you can use other things if you're not in a party, but you can use then utility bonus with 7.5%, defense 7.5%, universal 7.5%, another universal 7.5%. All just bonuses that can go in here that are going to give you that amount of stats. That's the usual that those companions can give. You can get some exceptions, yes. Then you can get some buff food, consumables, a potion giving you 5%. That is exactly the flask of potency right here. Then an elixir also giving you 5%. You can choose between the Sunlord's Gift elixir or the Wildstorm elixir. Then you have event food giving you 10%. So here we could use squash soup. You could use watermelon sorbet. Both going to give you 10% to offensive stats. There's a few others as well. You can look up my video on consumables and belt items and have them all listed in somewhere. And then you can have a belt item here giving us 3%, this being like the Forger's Box. You can also run with the Spider Totem, which would give you 2.5%, but a damage buff to Drow. And then you can run your Race, giving you 5%. Dexterity can give you 10%. It can give you upwards of 16% that it gives us here, depending on your ability score. Some classes could only get maybe 10% from here, so I just kind of averaged it out and put it at 10%, but it could be higher. Forte is going to give you about 33% or so, because it's not going to be true bonus to your offensive stats. You can read, and it's going to split between power, an offensive stat depending on your class, and then a defensive stat. So the defensive stat kind of takes away from the total. So if we have 44% Forte right there, we would gain 33% bonus to our offensive stats. And so we have that there. But then you can have companions when you're in a party, like Tutor giving you 5%, Portobello giving you 7%, Paladin Crit Aura giving you 4%. Anyway, it all totals up to over 250% stats. This would put you overcapped because you only need a total of 200% to max out all these 5 stats. You're just wasting all those extra stats if you're not balancing this properly. If you use all of these bonuses, you're just wasting nearly 60% stats. That's kind of pointless. You want to choose alternative options that's going to give you damage rather than wasting all that. And that is why you choose different options. For example, companions. We would use Minsc here instead of stats. We would use the Neverwinter Knight instead of stats. We would use the Batiri instead of stats. And if we're not in a full party, we're not going to have things like Tudor Portobello, the Crit Aura. We're not going to have that full party of Raptors. So we're also going to miss that. So we aren't going to have that many stats to move, and we end up with this right here, rebalancing for solo or pug content, where you're not relying on other people to give you stats. So you're not relying on the Tamed Raptor, and you're not relying on Tudor Portobello and the Crit Aura. So what you want to do here is straight away just get Minsk, Batiri, Neverwinter Night, they're already very good damage bonuses, and you're gaining this much damage, and you then just have this many stats, which is close to that 200% you need to cap all of those stats. Again, you need to be very careful where you're getting all these stats and which ones you're getting on which type of gear to be able to balance that properly, because you are just wanting to put 40% into power, 40% into accuracy, 40% combat advantage, etc. You need to also be careful that Forte is going to give a large portion, 50% of its effect, over into power. That's for everybody. Everybody who is the damage dealer, half of your Forte stat goes into power. So it becomes very easy to get power nice and high, and so you'll be focusing on other areas. Then you will gain a secondary offensive stat as a damage dealer depending on your class. So for rogue it's combat advantage, so it's easier for us to get lots of combat advantage. So it'll be harder on other classes. You'll need other gear pieces to give you more combat advantage, other companion bonuses and consumables, etc., to give you all that combat advantage. So this would be something like you would use in solo, and we can still get all those 90%. As you can see, we are doing right here. We're solo, not with a group. We can still hit all 90s in those stats and still use damage buffs like Minsk, the Knight, and Batiri. However, if you are in a group and can take advantage of all those group bonuses, you want to rebalance even further. You want to take choices that are going to increase your damage and give you room to fit those extra stats you can gain for being in a party. And that is where you would go to this. You'd be sacrificing your weapons, changing them to something that would give you damage. Your feet, you might change them to boots that would give you damage. Your shirt, you might change it to also give you damage. Your companion enhancement, you might use something like armor break, slowed reactions, dulled, etc. That's going to increase your damage, but also your parties. I just averaged it to 5% there. It's going to change depending on which one you're using, but then you still have the companion bonuses there. And ultimately, you're now nearly at a 50% damage buff, which is like 20% higher than you would use if you were by yourself. So that's pretty significant. You're still gaining over 200% stats, so you can cap everything and you're good. Now, there are classes who are going to naturally gain some powers and abilities that are going to give you stats. On Rogue, we get 2% combat advantage. That's it. We can use this feature to give us another 2.5% crit strike, but yeah. Other classes are going to have upwards of 20% free stats. Looking at you, fighter there, 10% combat advantage and 10% crit strike. And then an option to get even further, another 5% here. So they can gain like 25% free stats, which means they can rebalance even further. They can choose, let's say, a headpiece is going to give us damage, a neck and waist set that's going to give us more damage, an overload that's going to give us damage. Instead of using those stats, you just take alternatives that can give you a bit more damage buffs. Again, keep in mind, this is all kind of roughly the maximum stat bonuses you can get. Like feet, you can actually get 7.5%, but that's specific to some classes. Rings, you can get up to 10% damage against certain enemy types, which would be better than like just 7.5% stats. You can also get ones with 8% stats. I just kind of generalized it as well, as these are the usual bonuses you can use at that kind of level of stats. Also, like your arms here, you might not use the 10% ones because they give you power, and if you're in a group with the tamed raptors here, then you don't need that power. And then you'd be better off running something else like these healing mitts to give you crit strike. Ultimately, yeah, it's all about balancing, and hopefully this is at least somewhat helpful to show where all these stats are coming from, how much you need, and yeah, all those stats are readily available there. You can get more than enough to max out everything. And once you're at that like capped stats state with the over 200% totals here, you want to be switching over to certain damage buffs instead. Once again, a massive thank you to all of these channel members for their added support. We'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.